Ghosts of Tottori, the Ancient Art of Japanese Ghost Paneling. Chapter 1, Sendai. I was a young woman the day Katashi arrived at our village. His presence was both unsettling and welcome, for his reputation had preceded him, a man well versed in the esoteric knowledge of Yurei, the spirits that wander our realm. The tale of Katashi was known throughout our village, that his mother had been an itaku to her people, acting as a bridge between realms through which the voices of the spirits flowed. Her gift, it seemed, had been bequeathed to her son, manifest in his uncanny ability to commune with those who had passed beyond the physical. The story suggested Katashi had been nurtured not only by his enigmatic mother, but also by the very spirits she conversed with. Watching him now, walking with purpose and in stillness at the same time, I could not help but believe them. Katashi's expression revealed nothing of his story, an account of betrayal that had cut deep into the fabric of his beliefs. My father whispered the tale to us in the way that one speaks of tragedy. It was said that a rival woman driven by ambition had been passed over for the honor of Itaku before Katashi's mother was named so. In cold revenge, the woman did the unthinkable and waited to speak lies of the deceased after Katashi's mother had passed, leaving the Itaku unable to defend her honor. The rival wove a tapestry of deceit so convincing that when it came time to perform the ceremony of gratitude, the restless village hesitated and left the songs of praise unsung. The Itaku's spirit had not been honored and her rightful place in the next life threatened. As night descended, the boundaries between here and the hereafter grew thin. Those who walk in shadows rise to do their work in this hour, and so it was for Katashi. He began the ritual, one that he had never intended to perform alone. Only he possessed a true connection to the world of spirits, a world where his mother now resided, unable to move on. Only he could safely see her through to her rest. Candles flickered as if acknowledging the presence of the unrestful dead. Katashi's preparation was meticulous, each offering placed with care, each gesture imbued with meaning. This was not the spectacle of pageantry. It was a private communion, a son's solemn duty to mend the torn veil of respect owed. Katashi lifted a small cup of sake, tilting it gently as the liquid met earth, an offering to quench the thirst of the departed. His eyes shimmered with a sheen of unshed grief. Here was a man who had been schooled in the ways of the Yurei, yet the ceremonies usually required 3 guides. Now he conducted the ceremony alone as he ushered toward the ancestors the spirit of his own mother. A few of the villagers gathered as Katashi prepared. He moved with grace, each gesture measured and precise, setting out the tools necessary for the rite. All eyes were fixed upon him, silently acknowledging his mastery over that which they could not comprehend. He unfurled a scroll with great care, its parchment pale against the dark of the sky. The brushes and ink that would soon give form to the intangible were laid out in an orderly array beside him. There was a harmony to his actions, a rhythm born from practice and intimate familiarity with the spectral world. Katashi's fingers, calloused yet delicate, sifted through a small pouch, retrieving small beans which he sprinkled around. It was an offering of purification, a preparation of the space where 2 realms would briefly meet. He paused for a moment, head slightly bowed. The villagers held their breath as they beheld the solitary figure in the candlelight. He had become a bridge between worlds, a keeper of balance, and on this evening he would navigate the unseen currents that swirled invisibly around him. He took up a brush and painted the kanji required. He began a story that filled the air with a recounting of the Itaku's service to the village and the many acts that she would now be honored. His voice did not falter, nor his hand waver. As he finished the ceremony, he bowed his head in sorrow and reverence. The quietude that followed was punctuated only by a soft rustle of leaves. In the moments that followed, there was a sense that something within the air had changed, as if a weight had been lifted. The restless spirit of the old Itaku, denied her rightful passage by the village, had found solace at last in the actions of her son. The village may have forsaken its duty to honor her, but Katashi, true to the bond between mother and child, had fulfilled his. In the sanctity of this moment, the jealousy, malice, and lies that had marred her memory were rendered powerless, dissolving like mist. Her journey to the ancestors was complete, guided by the very hands she had once held in her own. Katashi's story had taken place many years ago, and his reputation had grown. In a society built upon honor, a story about such treachery seemed impossible, but here was Katashi, a man who had righted the wrongdoing, in both the physical and spiritual realms alone. He was a man that walked with ghosts, and his ceremonies had since guided many lost spirits to the waiting arms of their ancestors and the rest that they deserved. In doing so, Katashi defied tradition as much as he honored it. Ghost paneling was not a common practice, nor was it one widely embraced. To inscribe the kana and the kanji upon panels and use them as conduits between realms was to travel a path in shadow, where the risk of becoming lost oneself was ever present. Yet Katashi had chosen to devote his life to this art, to embrace the unorthodox, finding solace in an ancient ceremony performed by few throughout the centuries and often in secret. The practice had suffered dishonor more than once, as men who claimed to have power among Yurei were not honest. Sagishi, who took money but did not possess the skills they boasted of. Katashi was not one of these men. He did not accept money for his services, and he only shared his gifts upon invitation and request. He performed the ceremonies openly and for all to see. He did not speak of his accomplishments and did not seem to take notice when others did, even when it was whispered that he not only equaled the skills of the masters before him, but had surpassed them. I had never heard of ghost paneling before Katashi was sent for by our village elders, but I knew very well the reason for his invitation. It had been weeks since the haunting of our village had begun. A man who happily worked as a laborer lost his life in an unforeseen accident that left his community, his family, and his own soul devastated by his sudden absence. His spirit, unable to express the love for his family that death had stolen from him, did not leave the village, and night by night his wailing grew louder as his acts of frustration became more destructive. Every member of our village understood his tragic need for closure, his desperate desire for just one more moment to say the words now trapped unspoken between worlds. But he was beyond their help now. As the nights passed, the pain felt by spirit, family, and village grew unbearable. It was then that Katashi had been called for, and now he was here. However, his arrival came with both a solution and a dilemma. Whispers quickly spread through our village that Katashi's shodo artist, a vital part of his ensemble, had retired from the group after their last ceremony. His departure was not unexpected. He had spoken often of the life he yearned to build elsewhere, but the void of his leaving created ripples of unease. Every child is taught shodo. the calligraphy that is our heritage. The painting of the kana and kanji of our language is a connection to our past and our people. Those who are skilled in painting them are honored. Though there was tension among the whispers that quickly floated through our village, there was none that could be seen in Katashi's countenance. Within hours of his arrival, he let the elders of the community know that here he would seek a new artist of Shodo, and he requested that they introduce him to their best practitioners of this revered art. Katashi had honored our village with such a request, and word spread quickly. As my father shared his news with my family, all eyes turned toward me. The room was silent, save for the soft scratchings of our brushes on paper. I painted the symbols with practiced precision, each stroke deliberate and sure. There was no room for hesitation as Katashi stood watching at the far end of the room, casting a long shadow across the floor. There was an undeniable gravity to him, a stoicism etched into the lines of his face that spoke of a man who had gazed into the abyss and found there a familiar landscape. The tale of his guiding mother's soul would not leave my thoughts. The story of a man who could offer hope to the hearts of those who had lost loved ones was one of high honor. He asked for nothing in return from those that came to him seeking closure that only he seemed capable of providing. Though tradition had at first failed him and his mother, he did not turn his back upon it, but met, changed, and mended it. These thoughts threatened to overwhelm me as I struggled to concentrate on the symbols he called out. In between strokes, I watched him, this man who had practiced such a strange tradition, yet was sought after because of it. There was a rhythm to his movements, a cadence that seemed to align with the world around him. I concentrated on guiding my brush to move in tandem with his voice as he named the kanji, my own instincts rising to meet the challenge posed to our group. Katashi described our purpose as we painted. The role of the Shodo painter was vital, our purpose singular. We were to be guide and shepherd of the intangible, ferrying a soul across the river that all must finally traverse. Our symbols must be clear for all to read. They must be beautiful to honor the spirits they are meant for. And, most importantly, they must be imbued with the heart and intent, as they are the only way the spirits will know the direction that we offer them. Katashi called for the final symbol, and I was one with my brush as I completed the sequence that would serve as audition. When I laid down my brush, I felt a calm resolve settle over me. He walked across the room in silence, viewing the symbols each of us had created. Finally, he stood over one student and bowed before he spoke 2 words, arigato, followed by e, telling them thank you, but no. One by one, he sent students from the room, recognizing them as not appropriate for the task. He did not hurry. He honored and appraised each student's work with equal measure. When he finally stood over the symbols I had drawn, he studied them for what seemed like an eternity to me as I waited for the 2 words that would send me from the room. But no words came as he moved on to the next student. Then the 2 words were spoken, and that student rose from the floor and exited the room. So it went until there were only 2 students, and shortly after he sent that other student away, I was the only one who remained. Katashi then came back to me and said only 1 word, arigato. Then he left the room. I was uncertain what to do and finally rose to go back to my home and ask my father. But Katashi was already there, next to my father, who looked upon me with a pride that tightened my throat. The master of Yuri had examined my work and offered my father the honor of allowing me to take the place of the Shoto artist for tonight's ceremony. With a curt nod and a bow, my father thanked him and offered my service. Katashi, the man who walked with the ghosts, would guide me to master the strokes of my brush and light a path to guide the spirit of our village to his rest. I bowed to my father and then to Katashi, unable to speak as the honor to my family was great and I was in a state of disbelief. There was little time for emotion as Katashi turned to leave and bid me follow him, as the ceremony was to be performed that very night. Katashi could perform the ceremony by himself and had before, but he explained to me that it was always better with three: the painter, the singer, and the guide, all joining in energy and intent. He explained to me the symbols that must be drawn upon cloth panels and how they must be arranged when finished. The events of that morning felt like they had taken place days ago, and I now looked upon the new symbols I was instructed to paint in the room of the deceased man's home, where we would conduct the ceremony. At last, the cloth panels had been painted and erected upon bamboo poles to form a room inside of a room, the space in which we three could conduct the ceremony. In the muted glow of twilight, the room took on an ethereal quality. Shadows played upon the cloth walls, giving life to the ancient characters that adorned the panels. As we lit candles, they seemed to dance in the flickering light, and my anticipation of the ceremony ahead grew. Katashi stood at the center of our room, his figure still against the flickering light, his hands clasping a small clay vessel that held the ashes of incense. I watched him with a sense of fascination, as though observing a scene from a historical document come to life. His reverence for the art of ghost paneling was palpable, a silent testament to years spent mastering what had once been forgotten knowledge. He had delved into texts and rituals long shunned by many, piecing together the fragments of a practice that danced along the edge of memory and myth. The air was heavy with the scent of sandalwood, its smoke curling upwards like a spirit itself, ascending to the heavens. Katashi's focus never wavered. His rough voice, unfit for the melodic chants of other ceremonies, went silent, and it was the ghost singer's turn to fill the space between worlds with her haunting melodies. Her voice, clear and resonant, wove through the silence, a thread connecting the tangible to the intangible. Beside her, I knelt, my fingers stained with ink. The harmonious trio we formed was a testament to Katashi's understanding of the energetic needs of the ceremony. The beauty of the practice lay not in adherence to tradition, but in the unity of our purpose. Together, we created a tapestry of sound and silence, light and shadow, motion and stillness. It was a delicate balance, one that required the utmost precision and respect for the delicate veil that separated us from the other side. As the final notes of the ghost singer's song lingered in the air, a profound peace settled over the room. The air suddenly felt thick with sorrow. Katashi had already begun preparing for the arrival of the spirit, now beginning a story that bore the weight of an unsaid goodbye, a silence that yearned to be broken. Katashi spoke with deliberate care, arranging his words as carefully as he had ceremonial artifacts, with an expertise that belied his disregard for convention. There was something deeply reverent in his actions, each placement of incense or fold of cloth, each word spoken and movement of hand, all silent acknowledgments of the man whose spirit lingered in unrest. The ghost singer closed her eyes as if in meditation, humming a tune softly to not overpower the stillness. In the center of the room, a lone panel awaited my brush. The tools of Shoto lay neatly beside it. the inkstone ground to perfect consistency, the brushes poised as if eager to channel the whispers of the dead. Katashi's invocation now seemed to resonate with the very walls around us. The ghost singer's voice then rose, ethereal and haunting, weaving through the room like a thread of silver light. It was a melody of mourning and hope, a lullaby to soothe the restless soul before us. Her song did not mask the chill in the air, but embraced it, allowing the presence of the unseen to be felt more acutely. Katashi nodded, and it was time for my part. My hand moved with precision, guided by years of disciplined practice. Each stroke of the brush was an act of communion, the black ink flowing onto the pale surface of the panel in characters that held promises of peace and passage. The kanji told a story of life's fleeting nature, of bonds that transcended the physical realm, of farewells that needed no sound to be heard. A wailing came from all around the house and grew in volume. The smoke from the incense Katashi had arranged was now disturbed, and a chill fell over me. The spirit was among us in a way that I had never imagined, and I searched for the calmness that Katashi had described to me earlier to focus stillness upon my brush, though I was admittedly terrified. The wailing grew more intense until Katashi suddenly barked a simple command, Shinmoko. It bid the spirit to be silent, and the spirit obeyed. Katashi followed with a description of the man's family, their love for him, and the honor they felt for him. The ghost singer moved silently to lower the south-facing wall of cloth, so that we were now perfectly enclosed. As Katashi spoke more words to the ghost, he invited the spirit to rest, to allow his family to praise him. He assured the spirit that his family dearly loved him, but they must rest as well. Katashi then described the man's ancestors that had passed before him and spoke of their love for him. In the end, all family will be together in the next realm, and it is the duty of the spirit to look past the pains of life and fulfill the promise of lighting the way for the living to follow when it was their time. My strokes filled the parchment with the story, the names of the spirit's loved ones and ancestors. I painted the symbols for duty and fulfilling one's purpose. I painted the symbols of love that the man held for his family. Katashi called again, and the family members entered our room from a corner, each taking turns to place objects of love upon the altar we had arranged. They whispered words of gratitude and love and honor. When they were finished, Katashi praised each of them and the honor they had brought to the man. There was a light wind across the room before the candles ceased to flicker, and the smoke from the incense rose again in unbroken wisps. The tension of the unseen gave way to a quiet release. There was a sense that something had shifted, a subtle realignment in the fabric of existence. The spirit of the man who had been taken too soon had found the words he needed through our ceremony, and with them a path to the next realm. Katashi's presence was a silent pillar throughout, his face betraying nothing of the emotional undercurrents that surely moved within him. Yet, when the last note from the ghost singer faded into the air, there was a slight nod of his head, an acknowledgement that our ceremony had succeeded. As I gathered my shodo to present to the family, the honor of the moment settled upon me like a gentle mantle. To have been instrumental in such a profound transition was a privilege that forged within me a new understanding. In the precise lines and curves of my painting, there was a resonance that reached beyond life, touching the eternal cycle of existence. We rose to exit from the room in silence, leaving the family to comfort each other. In the morning, as the sun cast its first light, shoji doors to my room, I knew that the ceremony had changed me, for in it I had glimpsed the seamless blend of tradition and ethereal and had felt the true weight of the practice of shodo. A sudden hush draped over our home as Katashi arrived. In silence he stood before my father, the unspoken query hanging between them. My father, with his shoulders back and hands respectfully folded into the sleeves of his kimono, bowed deeply, a gesture acknowledging both the gravity of the request and the honor it represented. With a slight nod, imperceptible to those not versed in the subtleties of our customs, he acquiesced to the unvoiced petition. In our culture, words were often superfluous. Understanding could be conveyed in the merest shift of posture, the quiet exchange of glances. I observed from the periphery, my heart thrumming against my ribcage. The gravity of what was transpiring suffused the air, mingling with the scent of ink and parchment that lingered on my fingertips. Here was an opportunity to step beyond the boundaries of my familial duties, to embrace a path that melded my heritage with a calling I had only just begun to comprehend. Katashi's departure was as silent as his arrival, but his visitation marked the beginning of a profound transformation in the fabric of my existence. This taciturn man, a master of ghost paneling, had seen potential in the strokes of my brush, the discipline of my form. My father's acceptance of the offer was more than permission. It was an affirmation of my skill, a recognition of the lineage that flowed through my veins. With the closing of the door, a chapter of my life concluded, and another beckoned with open arms. It was a passage that would lead me into shadowy realms, where the veil between worlds was thin, where my calligraphy would serve as a bridge for wandering souls. My journey with Katashi would demand precision, courage, and an unwavering dedication to the unseen forces that governed the cycle of life and death. In the stillness of that morning, as I packed my brushes with meticulous care, I embraced the serenity that suffused my spirit. There was a harmony to be found in the order of things, in the understanding that every line drawn, every character formed, was part of a greater tapestry of existence. It was with this calm resolve that I stepped forward into the unknown, ready to learn, to grow, to guide. That is how my story began.